we're going to talk a little bit about lighter colored eyes, the iris of people with blue eyes or green eyes, blue-gray eyes, people without dark eyes, because you'll see more of the iris texture in the line work. So it's important that you do that correctly in your drawing. And don't take the easy way out just by making them have brown eyes. Oh man! I made it a little too wide on either side. And you would notice this later if you didn't have your magical transparency sheet that gave you the answers. You would notice this as you went along. But as for the iris part, not too bad. Make sure that if you don't see, if there's space underneath that iris before you get to the lower lid, that you give it space. That's important for sure. And then same thing goes as we talked about before with the sphere of the iris. The pupil needs to be in the center of that sphere. It can't just be in the center of the space that you see for the eyeball, or for the iris. So this sphere would continue if the upper lid wasn't over it, wasn't overlaying it. It would be like that. And the pupil is now in this, you can see that the pupil is in the center of that entire circle that is cut off at the top with the lid. And here it looks a little weird because it looks like it's high up, but that's okay. Because if you were to continue your iris sphere as if this eyeball was completely wide open and freaked out, you would see that this pupil is in the center. It doesn't look like it's in the center here. So don't just drop your pupil down in the space for the iris that you have, that you see, because that's not true. Got it? Okay, we're gonna move on to filling in the iris, the pupil. We're gonna fill in the pupil. I need to pay attention to this highlight. I see a highlight right here. Ooh. If I ended up going in, getting too overzealous and shading where I shouldn't have, I'll just sort of erase out. I do want to draw that shape for the highlight that I see. And then I'll go back in and darken things up. Okay. I will also start shading with my darker pencil. Right now I have a 5B. I'm going to start shading the edge of that sphere. Back and forth, keep things round. When you're shading, you're keeping things round because it's round. It's darker here than it is over here because of the shadow from the lid, and there's a lot of shadow underneath the top eyelid. All right, so I made that darker outer edge line of the sphere a little bit thicker. And now I'm going to talk to you about making the texture of the eye. Since this is a lighter eye and you can see the little lines in the eye. Eyes are very fascinating. You are going to put those little squigglies in. So I'm going to start, I'm going to do a lighter pencil 3B. Make sure it's sharp. I'm going to go from the outer edge and I'm going to make a little wiggle. I'm going to wiggle the line towards the pupil. I'm going to press harder at first, and then I'm going to go lighter as I get to the center. And the squiggles, the little wigglies, they're going to build up over each other. So I'm not just taking the wiggles and squigglies and spacing them out like this. I'm building them up, just like you built up your eyelashes. Over time, it makes the eyelashes form and they don't look spaced out and weird. So I'm just going to speed this up, but basically you're overlapping your little squiggles. Don't think too much about how they happen. They're basically like this. They start really wiggly at the bottom and they wiggle up. This is what they look like. Kind of like the person hasn't slept in 5 days, but since they're on top of each other, these little squiggles, it doesn't look like that anymore when you get done with it. When you get to the highlights, you're like, what do I do now? Just kind of, you can go over the highlight and then erase out. See the texture so far? So I'm just going to keep going with that, meaning I'm going to build up more lines. I can change up my pencil. I'm actually going to go to a 4H right now. I'm going to take the 4H and kind of shade lightly on top of what I did. I can always do that first. I can always shade with the 4H pencil everywhere and then use the 3B pencil or B pencil on top. Because nowhere inside this iris is there white except for the highlight. So the highlight should be the brightest part. Okay, so I have my first layer of texture down. I do need to make it darker so it looks more like this. So I'm just going to use a darker pencil than I had used before, which I think I was using a 3B. Maybe I'll go to a 4B. And if I start, what I'm going to do now is go from that outer dark line to about a third of the way in, and I'm going to make a partial squiggle. And what that will do is it will make this area, the area between this dark line for the outer edge and here, blend a little bit better, because you don't see a very, like a specific dark line around here. It's because there's more blending. What I'm going to do, so this is like, this is the dark line right here, and you have squiggle lines that go up already. I'm going to go from here to about there. So a third of the way to the iris. Like this. And then every so often I might just make a darker squiggle go a little farther. Again, things look natural when there's more randomness and not calculation to how you're shading or adding lines. So I've squiggled halfway down, all around here. I can do a little bit more over here. Squiggle, a third of the way in, I said, sorry. And now I'm going to take this pencil and kind of fuzz away right here on the edge of that dark line and that shadowy area that I just made by doing the partial squiggles. So now it looks more like this. It's getting there. Just needs a little bit, needs to bump up the line work here and needs to be more darker squiggles just randomly in here. Sometimes I do a light one, sometimes I do a dark one. Variety. I want to forget about my highlight. I'm taking that out again. I want to make this a little bit darker down underneath the top lid. So that's how you make your eye look like it's a lighter eye and not a dark eye, through lines that you build up inside the iris that look kind of squiggly, and using a variety of pencils, using dark pencils and light pencils.